Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to some, good evening to others. I'm Mike Fishman, and I'm here with John Podesta for a conversation about climate change and jobs this afternoon. I'm Executive Director and President of Climate Jobs National Resource Center. I've been an labor activist for 40 years. Started out as a carpenter, 20 years with the Carpenters Union, then 20 years with SEIU, in which I worked leading a local in New York and then at the national level, and probably been a climate activist for the last 10. And I'm here with my good friend John Podesta, who many of you know, but I'll just say a few words, John. Former Chief of Staff to Bill Clinton, founder of the Center for American Progress, chair of Climate Action Campaign, counselor to President Obama, chair of the Hillary Clinton campaign, and proud to say a board member of the Climate Jobs National Resource Center. And we're here to talk about where we are in the climate movement. John, I'd just start off by saying, after listening this morning to the panels and the work that you and I have done together, it seems we're at a historic moment. And everyone has talked about it as a moment of a new revolution coming in the green economy. And to me, it's a time when science, economics, and politics have all lined up to bring this conversation to the fore. Science, because 99% of anybody and everybody says this is a real climate crisis and we have to deal with it. Economics, because we're at a moment where we need millions of jobs, and investment in the green economy could provide that. And that power is getting cheaper in the renewable industry, cheaper than oil and gas. And politics, because there is a national debate that seems to have the support of the bulk of people. So seems like we're at that particular moment. You've been active for decades in the climate movement. How do you see things today?
Well, thanks, Mike. And let me begin by thanking you and Gary, Vinny, Laura, Nikki for getting this whole movement going. And I think this has been a terrific summit, and it's really painted a picture of what we can do together to build a more just economy, and one that's going to deal with the climate crisis. Let me tell you what I think is a little bit different than it's been just even 4 years ago. I think there's a new sense of urgency, there's a new sense of energy, and there's a deepening commitment to building that just and equitable economy that I talked about. Why the urgency? We're seeing the effects of climate. People talked about that all morning today in very, very stark reality on how it's affecting people's lives and livelihoods, how it's the fires that are burning, 94 large-scale fires across the American West. Four of the most polluted cities in the world were in the American West last weekend. Portland was the most polluted city in the world, I'm sorry. So that sense of urgency that comes from seeing this historic season of hurricanes, the massive flooding we're seeing in the Gulf, the fires in the West, and of course what's going on around the world, from 47 million acres burning in Russia to massive flooding in Africa and South Asia. People get this. It's an urgent problem. We have to tackle it. New energy. I think that really has come from the youth organizing that has been around for a while, but it's just taken off. We saw that with Shia Bastida this morning, the Youth Strike for Climate, the Sunrise Movement. There's just a massive movement of young people into the space, and I think that's inspired people of our age to just redouble our efforts to meet the moment and meet the challenge. And then I think this deepening commitment really comes from the intersection of the crisis we're feeling today. The economic crisis, the climate crisis, the racial justice crisis have common roots and they have common solutions. We have to put people to work in good jobs, family supporting jobs that can build the economy, but also create the resilience for our economy and begin down the path, which is massive and monumental, to a net zero economy by 2050.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. That sounds right, John. And you and I have talked many times about this new dialogue that's taking place between the climate movement and the labor movement. And I'd say that we both have come to a different place, that the labor movement, as we've gone around the country and talked to leaders around the country and to members, I would say union members are no different than anybody in this country, that we all see that there's a climate crisis and it affects us every day. The fires, the hurricanes, the heat, the cold. And so there's an urgency both from our kids and from our daily reality that labor has to be in this discussion. And second, I think on the climate side, there's been a new discussion about a need to bring labor into the discussion and talk about the jobs, not just talk about changing the environment and shutting things down, but building something up, building the new energy of the future and making sure that those are good jobs. And on the panel that we just heard this morning, it was interesting to hear Alex talk about the 20 million jobs that would be created, or the 25 million that Marilyn was talking about, all about in the same magnitude that has been talked about in the political discussion going on in the country. That there's this moment where we're going to create these new jobs and they should be good jobs. And I see a difference in the discussion we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think particularly the environmental community were too much in their silo. Sometimes didn't think about the effects that certain policies would have on communities, and we're pushing for good outcomes: cleaner air, cleaner water, a more livable planet, reduce the public health impacts. But it was kind of siloed in that environmental space. I started CAP to get out of that, to be a broad-based think tank that was focused on economic justice, social justice, racial justice, obviously environmental justice. And I think what's happened is both sides have broken those silos down. And what I think Jim Slevin said this morning, that we have to have an inclusive conversation that's relevant to communities. That has to be and I think that's why Climate Jobs is such an important initiative. It has to be bottom up. And then I think it also has to be supported from at the top and going down. But in the end of the day, each of these states is different. The communities are different. The job opportunities are different. There's not a one size fits all. We need to come to the table together and think about how we're going to both create the change that's needed to solve the climate crisis, but do it in a way that's going to create those good jobs. And I underscore the term good. I think Rick Levy said today, change is happening. We can build a low road, low wage economy or a high road, high wage economy. That's up to us. And it's up to political leadership. And I think together as a coalition, as a progressive community, pushing for that, we can get the job done. But then moving forward to the kinds of policies and investments that are labor friendly, that include job standards, that has to be part of the national conversation, but I think it has to be driven down into the state and local conversation as well.
Yeah, I think we're in the same place, John. I mean, I think the states, as we've seen with major change in the country on any issue, healthcare is a good example. The change starts in the states and the cities and drives up to the federal government. Then the federal government can drive it throughout the country. And I think we're seeing that happen as we did in New York. When the climate groups and labor got together, there was not much we couldn't accomplish if we did it together. And we had a Democratic Governor Cuomo, who was willing to act and be a leader on it. And we could see that you could actually put in place policies for the clean energy economy that would create good jobs, the prevailing wage on jobs, project labor agreements, neutrality agreements so that workers can organize. And it should be said, I think, that it's not just good jobs, but union jobs, because when unions are there, workers have a voice on the job, and we can keep those jobs as good jobs. Wage standards, all those things can be enacted at the city and state level, and then can also be enacted at the federal level. So if there's going to be a federal push to do a $2 trillion investment to create 20 million jobs, we would want that money and that action to be tied to labor standards. And by that, I mean the things we're talking about, things that give workers good benefits, good wages, and an ability to organize.
But for 40 years, we've seen the economy get more and more unequal. Why is that? Well, one of the fundamental reasons is workers lost their power. Mm-hmm. Really, I think the profound effects of the anti-union organization that began in the early 80s maybe even going back and iconically from breaking the PATCO strike, was open season on unions for corporations in this country. Worker power was weakened, unions were weakened, union density was weakened, and we saw middle class wages stagnate. We haven't seen much of any wage growth during even this pretty long boom. There's still not much wage growth. And then now it's kind of fallen off the cliff with the COVID crisis. But even up till that point, amongst the middle and lower paid jobs. So we've got to restore the ability to organize, the right to organize. We can do that through the mechanisms that you talked about. As I think Liz pointed out earlier, 2/3 of the American public support a stronger union movement. Then we ought to ensure that high road job standards attached to them, and I think that will do a lot to create essentially the building blocks to let people have the right to organize, and in states where there is stronger union density, to expand that work into these new job classifications and job opportunities, as you guys have done in New York.
Yeah. And I think that, there's always a conversation from the industry about how much it's going to cost to have better paid jobs. But the truth is, we've seen, like in New York, where the wage went to $15 an hour, minimum wage, it didn't put everybody out of business. It didn't make the hamburgers go up $1 more, that it actually can be absorbed. And for instance, when Alex was talking about rewiring America and everybody bringing in quality electrical appliances into their homes and rewiring, if those are good jobs, those people coming into your homes, it doesn't increase the cost of the product. It just costs a little bit more for the individual, but it gets saved by the cost of the electricity. So I think we're talking about building a more equitable society for everyone and creating those jobs in every community, and it's cost effective. In the end, I was listening to auto industry electric vehicle advocate yesterday, and they said the average cost per mile for a diesel truck right now is $1.82 a mile, that an electric vehicle truck, a semi, would be 50 cents a mile less. And that would be an enormous savings, and it would be good for the environment. And everybody's going to move in that direction. And so new jobs will be created, new vehicles, all that manufacturing could be here in the United States at decent wages, because the savings will be enormous over the long run on electric power generation.
Yeah, I think it's very smart to focus on this question of supply chains and what it's going to take to make sure, Alex made the point that a lot of this work inherently can't be offshore. It's putting stuff in buildings, it's building transmission, it's creating new generations. That is going to happen here, and it needs to happen with union labor. But there's also, in terms of, some of these markets are global, particularly in transportation, and focusing on ensuring that those supply chains are built out here. My friend Ali Zaidi made this point, that the policies support that we have border adjustment to ensure that, people can't dump, in essence, the pollution that's created overseas into and undercut the market here. All those things are important. We need to think those through. But I think there's plenty of potential to both create that labor base that's highly trained, skilled, and productive, here and build industries of the future here. There'll be competition for that. I mean, our friends. I talked to our friends in Europe. They're on the same pilgrimage as Sharon Burrow mentioned. Everybody wants to get in on the action. If you go to India, they believe in electric transportation, but they want the stuff made there because they need to put their people to work. And we need to have the same mindset. And that takes a new refocus on an industrial policy that's going to work for American workers. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, that all sounds right. And I think what everyone stressed today universally was we're at the edge of this massive investment that has to take place to save the planet, but also because we need jobs. We need to have labor standards in the investment in the new economy, and we need to help those communities that are going to be affected when the new economy gets going. And of course, it's going to be a transition. When we talk about just transition, it actually will take time. You can't shut things down until you have new things built. And it takes time to build new things. Even the 9 gigawatts of wind in New York will take 10 to 15 years to build. Yeah. And in that time, you still have to have energy, and you still have to have a plan on how you're going to move to the new energy. And that's our next step, really. We have to have a plan, a clear map of how we're going to change from one fossil fuel-based economy to a new green energy economy. And that will take time, but we have to be ready to start out on day one. And urgency is now.
Yeah, and I think there are ideas. Joe Manchin introduced a bill that takes one of the old supports for manufacturing and targets it to communities that have been hard hit by the energy transition. And whether that's coal country or places where the transition is taking place at the power plant level. I mean, I think being mindful of and local. And again, I come back to those conversations have to involve the people in the communities, whether that's Texas or Illinois or New York or West Virginia, about what kind of future are we going to build. I mean, we know we have to transition. The question is, will it be one that we can be proud of, that will build higher wages, family supporting jobs, climate jobs, and Climate Jobs National Resource Center is playing a vital role because it can't just be at 50,000 feet. You got to take it down to the level where people really see their future in building that economy, participating in it, fighting for it, and bending the political will of the political system to that future. I think we can get the job done.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And it does take getting down to the nitty gritty. We have to be building at the state and city level, no matter what. We have to, where we still have power, where we still have influence, and where the political system is ready to act, and will be more and more because of the economics of the green revolution, then we have to be prepared to add those labor standards wherever we have that strength. And
I think one of the people that get this maybe the most are mayors, who they have to attract human talent to their cities. They need to build cities that people want to live in. And I think they get the intersection between having strong job standards, a strong unionized workforce, and a vision for what that future looks like.
Yeah, and the cities are where there is still power to get things done in masses of people and massive distressed communities. I mean, I was just hearing some statistics from Vinny about what's going on in New York right now and the number of people who are on unemployment in the city because of the pandemic. All of those people have to come back to a job, and we have to create those jobs. And there's no better investment than in the green infrastructure and green investment in a new economy. Well, there's nothing that teaches you about climate change more than living through a smoke-filled house that you can't do anything about because the smoke is in your entire neighborhood. And I remember my last thought, I was in Beijing when we were looking at climate change, and we were there for 4 days. And one of our members of our delegation, who really didn't believe in climate change, got to the city and couldn't go out for 4 days because the air quality was so bad from the carbon emissions and the smog coming from the industrial plants and the coal burning. He went back a believer, and we're all experiencing that now.
Well, I'm a runner, and I run in New Delhi in the winter, so I've taken a few years off my life.
Yeah. So, John, it was great to talk to you. Thanks for participating in the conference. Thanks to everybody who's online with us. We did not have enough time for questions, but we will be on chat. I think we'll be sending us questions later on. So really appreciate it. And as always, John, good to see you and see you soon.